Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Every day the approach of fall became more and more tangible. This time of the year always caused Clara an incomprehensible longing. She involuntarily summed up in her mind the preliminary results, trying to highlight the pros and cons of another year lived. This habit appeared to her not by chance. Thanks to the profession of her husband Chuck, with whom they lived almost 40 years before retirement, worked as a chief accountant. In the man's labor book, there were only 2 entries. The first, with the date of hire, had been made a long time ago. The second was only a few years ago, when the man took a well-deserved retirement. It is noteworthy that after his retirement, the farm ceased to exist, and its lands and buildings were bought by one of the new millionaires. Chuck Corver wholeheartedly supported the main business of his life, and often told his wife Clara. And they also say that nothing depends on one person. I had to leave, so our collective farm went down the drain. If I had been in my place, I would not have allowed this outrage to happen. The woman was skeptical of such statements of her husband and did not miss the opportunity to once again prick his ego. Oh, Chuck, listen to you. So it turns out that you alone kept the household, wasn't it? I was in charge of all the bookkeeping. All the numbers were in those hands. Corver vigorously shook his calluses with those hands to make his speech have the desired effect on his eternally mocking wife. Well, Clara had not been the last person in the household in the not-too-distant past either. She started as an ordinary milkmaid, and after graduating from veterinary school was appointed head of the farm. Therefore, the woman rightly believed that she also made a tangible contribution to the common cause. Despite frequent disputes, the elderly spouses lived soul to soul. The children grew up and scattered from their native home, but did not forget their parents. Yesterday, the eldest daughter called to warn them of her arrival. "Mom, we're leaving on Friday. We'll visit you for a couple of days. Don't get ready, we won't be here for 3 or 4 days." This news made me both happy and sleepy at the same time. Clara said to her daughter with undisguised bitterness, "You always only visit your parents." No, to rest, to give the children a chance to breathe clean air. You're in a hurry, you're flying somewhere. And even scientists confirm that the best vacation where there are no factories and plants. My daughter grinned at the other end of the bridge. "Mom, do you even believe what you just said?" "No, I don't deny that the places in our Maria are amazing. But will Daddy give us a break? We're all for him, including Vanya. With Lisa, it's free labor, and he's sure to hand us rakes, scythes, and other tools right at the gate. And then also calculate the efficiency of each worker. Will respond to this fair comment." There was nothing, because Chuck really strove to introduce everyone to useful labor. Even the yard merchant had to work off his modest ration of food. Chickens don't dry. The master also reproached them when they refused to fulfill his plan. "Why are you clucking? You have 8 chickens, but only 5. Why am I feeding you?" Kelly, Corvers. The daughter was used to her father's antics. But her husband didn't want to accept his father-in-law's rules. For the first few years after the wedding, they still came to Colorado. On vacations, but they never got a chance to relax. The daughter was very resentful of her father, and one day she told him so. "Daddy, we're not slaves on a plantation to work your acres from morning till night." "We are. We just want to lie in the sun, go to the river. After all, a vacation is given to a person to be able to fully rest." Chuck's such wishes put in a dead end. "So I'm offering you the best kind of vacation. Nothing strengthens the body like work. You're used to bumming around in your own town. That's why you look as pale as mushrooms." My daughter and son-in-law didn't voice their discontent anymore, but after 2 wasted vacations, they stopped coming to the village for the summer. Chuck held a grudge against them. He did not find fault in what had happened. The man believed that everything is to blame for the wrong upbringing. Asking children and raised some kind of flawed creatures, and it is understandable why this happened. To their every wish they rode on your head, and now we're getting the fruits. Yesterday after her call, the elder Corver also grumbled for 2 hours. But Clara didn't give in to his provocation, and the scandal didn't take place. And today she got up with the rooster to get ready for the arrival of guests as a hostess with experience. She didn't want to make a nuisance of herself. The day before, she cleaned the house and done the laundry. All that was left was to put the clean clothes to sleep. Trying not to make noise, the woman headed for the exit, but one catch treacherously fastened under her feet. Immediately, her husband's voice rang out. "Clara, where did you pour us out so early?" Although there was no one in the house except her husband and the cat Jack, the mistress replied in a whisper, "I'm going to the river. I have to sleep curtains and bedspread. I still washed everything yesterday." The man unhappily interrupted, "And hunting you to beat your legs when the column in the yard." The woman did not enter into an argument with her husband and only promised me not long. "And you sleep, I'll be back. Then I'll make breakfast." Instead of answering, heard a long sigh, meaning that Chuck is extremely dissatisfied with the behavior of his wife. But for 10 years of marriage, Clara had learned to ignore, as they said in the village, her husband's little holes. She was afraid in galoshes not to wet her feet and picked up a basin with Pasternak's underwear. Clara walked leisurely towards the river, which was no more than a 3-minute walk away. But she heard women's voices in the distance and grinned wryly, thinking I was the only one who was so bad. Turns out I'm kind of crazier than I am. I wonder who can't sleep. The woman listened, and after a few seconds, she concluded, "I think it's Wendy who's dashing." "Well, now hold on. Will those two beasts get anyone?" There was nowhere to go, and the woman began to carefully descend the steep cliff, with wild bushes. The closer she got to the morning gathering of Maria's chief gossipers, the more clearly their dialogue could be heard. Wendy divorced her elderly interlocutor, Maria confess. "When you were young, there was such a thing that a man ran away from his woman at night. And there was such a thing. Some men were so lustful to the female sex that they managed to offend more than one hut, and all about nutrition. We ate everything homemade and without chemicals. That's why we didn't get sick. And if there was a simple case of stomach problems, we drowned the mummy. I still always have this remedy in the house." Wendy chuckled nastily. "That's probably why you've been living longer than you should. And you've become like a mummy yourself." It was the fanatical love for the miraculous natural product was the reason that Maria in the village began to be called a mummy. The nickname was very apt, as the old woman had a clear outward resemblance. No one in Maria knew how old the old woman was, and she herself had completely forgotten her date of birth. But memory lapses and some other age-related peculiarities did not prevent Maria from always being aware of events. It was she who was the main spreader of rumors in the village. True, this transmission often resembled a game of spoiled telephone, and as it spreads, local news grows with non-existent details. To avoid becoming the subject of discussion, gossip girl Clara ducked into the bushes. She thought, "I'd better get away from the women, or they'll make up stories about me. Then you'll have to prove to people that you're not a camel." The woman carefully avoided the goods, who also came to the river with goats. "I'll go. There is a convenient place where the water is like crystal." Cautiously, the woman began to wade along the shore. She almost reached the old willow tree. How suddenly from above! Where did the country road run? A noise was heard, cars coming. Clara squatted down in the bushes. The thought flashed through her mind, who else had come here? From the ambush, she could see first a woman and then a man get out of the car. The woman had a shoebox in her hands, the kind of packaging the village store once sold imported women's boots in. So the first thing Corver thought of was that these strangers wanted to throw garbage into the river. She already wanted to tell them everything, but she heard the man irritatedly told his companion, "Go to the car. There is nothing to make light of here." The stranger objected, "There's not a living soul here." "What are you afraid of? It seems to you that there is no one here." "I grew up in the countryside, and I know that in such nice places everyone has eyes and ears." The man nodded toward the bushes that hid Clara. "I do not rule out that over there, for example, lurked one of the lovers of sensation." Secret watchers felt rivulets of sweat running down her back. She felt uncomfortable, but realized she could not give away her presence. The man held out his hands toward the box. "Give it to me, I'll do it myself." The woman handed him the box and headed for the car. The man went down to the bank, but did not stop at the water's edge, but went almost to the middle of the stream, where the current was more rapid. He lowered the box into the water with the words, "Well, that's it. No one will disturb us anymore." These words by the stranger were spoken in such a tone that Clara became uneasy. She sensed that the two men were up to something evil. Barely waiting for the man to go upstairs to the abandoned car, the village sleuths rushed to the shore, but the river current had already picked up their unexpected trophy and carried it down. Corver. She forgot about her daughter's arrival and the laundry left in the basin. She was running knee-deep in water trying to catch the howling box. Wendy watched and stunned. When they saw the running request that it might be with her a rabid fox bit, the unfortunate Maria shook her head disapprovingly. Then she would not have gone into the water. "There's something else going on here. You, Wendy, younger than me, are supposed to help." Wendy mumbled, "Why should I go if she won't?" But the mummy pushed, "Smoke and go. Not just in an hour, the Broad will stumble and sink, and we'll be to blame for her death." Wendy rushed across the stream. "Aunt Clara, what's wrong?" Corver was almost out of breath, and a box screeched a little audibly. "Wendy, catch the box." Corver dashingly understood the task and quickly caught the shoebox. But helped all, the nominated package slips out of his hands, so had to press this low to his chest, and at this very moment a squeak was heard. It was so unexpected that Wendy almost dropped the box from her hands. She yelled all around, "Oh ladies, I think there's someone in there. Hear that? It's making a voice. I'm scared, Maria from the shore. They must be monsters." They decided to get rid of the kittens. "Bring the box over here. Let's see who's hiding in there." Wendy and Clara waded ashore. All three rushed to the mysterious find on their license. The older box was opened by Maria. The old lady couldn't help but be overwhelmed with emotion. Oh, and the fathers. There are also children. The baby looked at the women with eyes as clear as the summer sky. For several minutes, the women were silent, unable to believe what had really happened. Finally, Wendy said they should take him to the warmth. Clara supported the idea. "Let's go to my place. My house is closer. I think the first thing we should do is report it to the proper authorities." "I saw the men who did it, a man with such cheerful stubble and a woman with him. I didn't get a good look at them, but I recognized their voices." Maria added if the girl was young. She was definitely a cuckoo mom. There's a lot of them today, wandering around and then dropping off babies. Wendy argued if they had. Were they trying to kill the baby or the little girl? Chuck was amazed when he saw a procession of women led by his wife out the window. He jumped out of Clara's house. "Is something wrong?" "Something's wrong." Peter went to rinse the laundry. She went to the woman's house and began to tell him about the morning's adventure. Interrupting each other, Chuck only shook his head. "How many years have I lived in the world? This is the first time I've encountered such a thing. But the women are not amateurish. We'll have to report it to the proper authorities." The man pulled on his cap and saddled his bike. No sooner had the August sun reached the horizon than the news of the strange find spread all over the world. The true old-timers of the village clutched at their hearts. What a horror! What kind of a wicked day should one be to let one's own child go down the river? It was this version became the main in the criminal case, which was opened after the inspection. The investigators who arrived at the scene of the incident, the absent-minded mother searched the whole neighborhood, but the search did not yield any results. The found girl was sent to the district hospital, and the fate of the little girl for many years remained unknown to the women who found her. The story began to be gradually forgotten when new circumstances were suddenly revealed. Nancy was preparing breakfast when her husband's displeased shout came from the bedroom. "Where's my shirt?" In addition to irritation in the man's voice, slipped, anger, discontent, and a whole bunch of other negative emotions. The woman whispered, "He got off on the wrong foot again." But aloud she quite peacefully advised, "Darling, take a closer look at all your shirts in the closet." His wife's answer did not satisfy Martin and ideas. "Show me, you see, I'm busy." "Wait a minute." Outraged sighs came from the bedroom. Then they were replaced by loud thumps on the platinum closet door. Nancy sensed by her skin that another scandal was brewing, so she hurried to the hot. "Martin, are you making every little thing an excuse for a scolding?" The woman opened the closet. "Here are all your shirts. Rose your western eyes and everything will be fine." Man, you poked your wife's chest with your index finger. You're the one with the eyes. I need a pale blue striped shirt. I don't see it here. Nancy blushed and stammered and began to make excuses. I'm sorry, I didn't have time to wash it yesterday, but you could have chosen something else. You have a whole collection of shirts. Martin looked down at his wife. I need the one with the stripes. I have an important meeting today. A blue shirt is the most appropriate for the event. Martin looked at his wife again with a piercing gaze and asked with a sneer, wondering what you were so busy with that you didn't have time to fulfill your direct duties? The woman took her eyes away and began to rub her apron with excitement. Adriana had a report concert in music yesterday, so I didn't have time. The man clutched his head. Every day it's the same thing. Adriana is our girl, incredibly talented. I don't mind. People admire song and dance, but not to the detriment of the family. Nancy quietly objected to Martin. What damage are you talking about? Doesn't our daughter seem to be making progress? The man interrupted impatiently, not generalizing. I've already told you that I have no feelings for that girl. Martin, please be quiet. Adriana might hear. Let her hear. And I'm not going to keep quiet anymore. I'm sick to my stomach and clicky. It was your idea, and I've regretted giving in to you 100 times over, no matter what you do to me. But I can't take someone else's baby as my own. Nancy folded her arms across her chest. Martin, I'm begging you, don't yell. You can't do this. That's right, we can't live like this anymore. I've told you many times to get rid of your illusions, but you're stubborn. What about merging? God didn't give us children of our own. You could have accepted it. That's what smart people do. And you've got the urge to do something. You want to make someone happy, and the result is nothing but trouble. The woman tried to get a word in her defense. Martin, what kind of trouble are you talking about? That poor child is giving you trouble. Do you still ask? Of course you can't understand my resentment because you're only preoccupied with her. You don't give a damn about me. You didn't even deign to wash my favorite shirt on time. Martin held himself back and sprinkled his wife's head with reproaches. The woman flinched at every word and constantly looked back at the door. She still hoped Adriana couldn't hear anything. But the 12-year-old girl was crying silently, leaning against the doorway in her room. She swallowed the bitter tears and whispered, "Still, I'll run away. I'll be patient a little longer, and then I'll run away." Adriana first began to think about running away 2 years ago when she found out she was adopted. The discovery hurt her childish heart. But she had to be patient, because hasty actions could lead to undesirable consequences. Adriana realized that in case of an unsuccessful escape, an orphanage awaited her. She did not want to get into such institutions. Therefore, all these years she had to pretend that she knew nothing about the real situation. The foster parents, the girls also pretended that everything was fine in the family. Nancy especially tried. For 12 years, this kind woman tried her best to keep the family together. Nancy and Martin had been friends since they were students. At first, their relationship was more like a mutually beneficial partnership. The girl wrote essays for the guy, and he willingly played the role of her personal bodyguard. In this format flew all 5 years of study, and before receiving a diploma, both realized that they do not want to part. Martin was the first to bring it up. Listen, Nancy, you and I have already been through it. Personally, I'm depressed about the separation. How would you like to stay with me? Although the girl expected from her friend quite different words. She replied, I certainly don't mind. But what kind of relationship format do you have in mind? Nancy knew that Martin was against old-fashioned conventions. Many times the guy declared that he was in favor of free love, but before his words seemed to be a usual bravado, and the girl didn't pay much attention to them. That's why she took Martin's proposal with understandable wariness. But he also answered her direct question honestly. Nancy, I respect you very much, and therefore I will not deceive you. Yes, I don't want to run to the registry office, but you won't agree to cohabitation. It was both a question and a statement. After a short pause, Nancy replied, No, I wouldn't. I'm sorry, but I was raised conservative. But I'm not the only girl on the planet. You have plenty of admirers, and someone is bound to say yes. The conversation was taking an unpleasant turn, and the girl wanted to leave, but Martin grabbed her arm. "Nancy, don't be so hot. You didn't even let me finish my thought. Anyway, I don't want any other girl. For your sake, I'm ready to change my principles." The boy suddenly blushed and stammered. "You marry me from then on. Everything will be as it should be with the wedding and guests." This crumpled and explanation to the depths of the soul touched the girl, and she gave her consent. Although in Philistine circles, such marriages are considered unstable. Psychologists have a different opinion on this matter. They consider a pragmatic approach is a more reliable guarantor for the preservation of marital bonds than romantic sense of respect for the interests of the partner was the fertile ground on which soon blossomed love. Martin. To his friend, he endeavored to forestall every desire of his young wife, and Nancy reciprocated him. Therefore, the first 5 years of matrimony were the happiest period of their lives. But both were very anxious to become parents. With this question, there were insurmountable difficulties. Doctors found in Nancy some pathology, interfering with her getting pregnant. For several years, the woman was intensively treated, went to expensive resorts, but the matter did not move from the dead point. Then a doctor working with the couple advised not to get yourself wound up for nothing. You have 2 choices. Find a woman who will bear a child for you or take the baby. Nancy didn't immediately realize what the doctor was suggesting and retorted, "Well, if I can't have babies, then the baby won't be ours either. That's not quite right. It will be half yours since your husband has no reproductive problems." Martin saw his wife turn pale. He acted like a devoted and loving husband. No, that's not an option for us. We want a level playing field on this issue. So we will consider the second proposal." Nancy then appreciated her husband's noble act. "Thank you, Martin. You are the best man in the world." The following weeks and months flew by in anticipation. The couple immediately announced their desire to take a baby under a year old who would have no connection to the biological parents. During the waiting period, Martin had cooled down a bit and mentally berated himself for his rash move. He secretly hoped that the search process would yield nothing, but one day they got a call. "Come to our shelter. A beautiful baby girl has been brought in. No parents could be found, so the girl's background is completely clean. And another big plus, no abnormalities in terms of physical and mental development." Nancy was in 7th heaven from the unexpected happiness. Therefore, Martin could not deny her one more small pleasure. After all, he was used to fulfill her wishes, and thought that the appearance of a little girl would not change his comfortable lifestyle. Indeed, for the first 2 years, it was even interesting for a man to feel like a father. But then more and more, often the brain began to sharpen the thought you could have your own child and grow a foundling. "Tell me, why do you need it?" This question he asked himself every time he noticed that his wife gives all the time to his adopted daughter. When she began to make claims against her, she would laughingly reply, "Martin, well, you are a grown-up uncle. Aren't you ashamed to compete with a little girl?" He was not ashamed at all, because he thought he had more right to the attention of the woman he loved than a foundling taken from the orphanage. Nancy tried in every possible way to fight her husband's jealousy, but neither persuasion nor appeals to conscience worked on him. The first scandal broke out when Adriana fell ill with angina. The girl had a fever, and Nancy stayed with her for 2 days. In the morning, Martin went into the kitchen and found the pots empty. Anger clouded his judgment, and he burst into the nursery, where his wife was fasting at the sick child's bedside. "Nancy, do you think this is normal?" The woman stared at him, uncomprehending. "Martin, there's no need to scream. The baby's only just fallen asleep. She was feverish all night." He mockingly teased the woman, too. "The baby just fell asleep. I woke up an hour ago. Thought I'd get breakfast, but the kitchen was a mess. Martin, you can see I can't. How hard is it for you to make yourself an omelet?" That first time he gave in to his wife, and then even apologized for his unworthy behavior. But it was then that he finally lost the desire to be a father to someone else's girl. Martin began to avoid joint walks. If Adriana asked him to play with her, he would rough her up with food. "You're a big girl, play by yourself." When Adriana went to kindergarten, Martin only as a last resort agreed to pick her up. At school, the same story repeated itself. One day, the teacher couldn't stand it and told Nancy Nikolaevna everything. "It's a strange family you have. It seems that your father lives his own separate life." Nancy was afraid to tell the truth and gave a whole vegetable garden of tall tales, trying to convince the teacher that everything was all right. "My husband is a very busy man. He has a demanding job, so he can't give his daughter much attention." The teacher was puzzled again. But in such situations, children usually make up the most incredible stories about their dads, and your Adriana is acting as if she has no father at all. Nancy had nothing to say, and she hurried to end the unpleasant conversation with the teacher. "I'm sorry, Adriana, and I don't have time. She's in music school." And about the story about father's deeds, I can say from my own experience that not all children are ready to talk about what is going on at home. Our Adriana is a very secretive girl, so she doesn't like to expose her feelings. Nancy saw the teacher look at her in bewilderment. At that moment, she wanted to fall under the ground in shame. But she found nothing better to do than rebuke her daughter. "Adriana, you have a wonderful father. You can be proud of him." The girl lowered her head and muttered under her nose, "He's alien, like in an alien movie." Nancy grimaced. "Adriana, what the hell are you talking about? Are you having some kind of sick fantasy?" The girl didn't answer anything, but after that incident, she finally withdrew and spent most of her time in her room. Adriana loved her foster mom very much and didn't want to be the cause of her troubles. For this reason alone, she tried not to bother Martin's eyes, so that he would not play the son to his wife. When another dispute broke out between the parents, the girl persuaded herself to be patient. "Adriana, there is only a little bit left. After 9 grades, you can go to college." True, this option was possible only when achieving certain success in music school. And Adriana tried her best. She participated in various competitions. And at school, not a single concert was without her. But time dragged very slowly, and one day the nagging of her foster father became unbearable. After the contest of young talents, which was held in the regional center, in the group of participants missing one contestant. Everyone had seen Adriana just a minute ago, but could not say where she was. The group leader was hysterical. "What's going to happen now? What am I going to tell Adriana's parents? I'm going to get fired from my job for this." The average guess was 100% correct. The day after the young violinist went missing, the teachers asked her to write a letter of resignation. Adriana was searched for in the regional capital and nearby towns and villages. The best operatives were involved in the search, but the girl was never found. Of course, Nancy was the most worried. The woman could not forgive herself for not going to the contest with Adriana. She guessed that the daring girl ran away because of the unhealthy situation in the family. In secret from her husband, the unhappy mother decided to use the services of a private investigator, especially in the list of her acquaintances was such a specialist. The only person who was happy about the girl's disappearance was her adoptive father. Martin felt on top of his game again, and like an incantation mentally repeated, "Just don't find the girl. Lord, make it so that she would not be found." His heart was pounding frantically in his chest with excitement. Nancy nestled against the fancy glass of the carriage window, trying to see her sister among the people meeting her. But the dirt so thickly covered the once transparent surface that only silhouettes could be seen. The conductor stepped past twice. During the third passage through the parlor car, she lingered near the strange passenger. "Citizen, you're trying in vain. Even in vain. What man can't see what is going on the other side of the camera?" The conductor laughed a good joke, and Nancy shuddered. Her nerves felt as if 2 words, citizen and camera, had been pulled with a whip. Memory instantly responded to these verbal cues. Imagination immediately presented images from the recent past. That, and of a young woman. With a tremendous effort of will, Nancy caught up with the terrible visions and smiled strainedly. Indeed, in your carriage you can safely organize quests. It's quite an appropriate environment. The conductor happily splashed her hands together. "Oh, that's an idea. We need to offer the bosses a creative way to get additional profit." Joy was quickly replaced by sadness. And the woman with a despairing sigh added how many years they have been promising to write off this old stuff. but it's still there. I used to love my job so much, but now it's like hard labor. Nancy felt another jolt to her strained nerves. God, she thought, how many years am I going to shudder at the mention of such words? The conductor noticed the pale face of the passenger who had been sitting by the window all 3 nights of the journey. The woman seemed strange to her at once, but it was considered a gross violation of the rules to pester passengers. The flight was coming to its logical conclusion, and the conductor was anxious to get home. She looked at Nancy once more carefully. You'd better hurry up, because I've got a lot to do. You're the last one left in the vestibule. Nancy was embarrassed again and grabbed her bag. Yeah, I'm on my way. My sister is supposed to meet me. The conductor with annoyance thought I care. Who's meeting you? She's a weird lady, and she's dressed out of style. And her luggage is suspiciously sparse. Suddenly, the clerk had an epiphany. The girls must be from out of town. I should have known better. Something began to fail me. My experienced eye is not good. The owner of the long-distance train car argued with herself for a long time about the nuances of hard work. But Nancy Evans had no idea that it was she who had provoked the activation of the uniformed woman's mental activity. There was heavy two-way traffic on the platform, and Nancy stood for a long time in the middle of this lively stream. Suddenly, the voice of Vanessa Nancy sounded from behind. Why on earth are you standing like a stiff? The sisters hugged each other for a long time and expressed their emotions loudly. When the excitement of the meeting had died down a little, Vanessa confidently took her under her arm. I'm in the car. Let's go to the parking lot. We'll have time to talk. Nancy nodded her head in agreement and obediently followed her sister. She admired Faith, who was groomed from the tips of her nails to her hair. She held herself very confidently, and it finally confused her younger sister. Vanessa had always been cloistered and quiet, afraid to say a word, and here I just didn't recognize her a few times my sister looked back to make sure Nancy was keeping up. Before getting into the car, Vanessa asked in surprise, nodding as she walked to her travel bag. And that's all your luggage? Nancy blushed and mumbled something inaudible. The older sister remarked bitterly nothing. Rags are a matter of time. The main thing is health. If your arms and legs are in place and your head is all right, then no hardship is too great. My hubby is in the throes of extracting dough to then flush the process all at once. Often reminds me of a salt shaker in a latrine. It's quick, but not always efficient. Vanessa opened the car door, and Nancy saw a man with the same lonely beard. I'd like you to meet my sister. This is my treasure. Ethan Simmons is my second lawful husband and passionate. A satisfied smile appeared on Ethan's face without taking your gaze off the laptop monitor. Vanessa, you're too much to handle. You have me in a concrete vise. Nancy could hardly contain her laughter. She was struck not so much by the appearance of her husband, her sister, as by the tone of the man's voice. It was a soft female soprano. Ethan didn't even look at his relative, but unmistakably guessed her mood. Nancy, don't be surprised at anything. You're going to have to deal with a lot of weirdness, but I want to reassure you. I'm fine in every aspect of my life, and my voice is unique. However, it doesn't interfere with my life at all. Really my gold. Ethan kissed her cheek, and Vanessa kissed her husband with a ringing kiss. Move over. Occupying the entire salon. Her sister's husband instantly shrank back and crawled away to a corner. Nancy timidly sat down next to him. Ethan immediately tried to intrigue his spouse's relative Nancy. If you dream of getting rich, come to me, I'll teach you how to forecast. And Vanessa heard everything and threatened her husband with her fist. I'll teach you. Don't you dare spoil my sister. She'd had enough of that already. Ethan was quiet, but he looked at Nancy with an expressive look. She pretended not to understand. Unhappy thoughts had taken over her mind again. She could not dismiss them. Nancy's whole life lay ahead of her. She wanted very much not to make any more fatal mistakes. The rest of the way to the house where her lover's spouse had made their family nest. Nancy thought about future prospects, but all thoughts were reduced to one alone. That is, without outside help, she was unlikely to be able to bring her fate to an even straight line. Her older sister, as if reading her thoughts from a distance, said confidently not barefoot Nancy. "Everything will be fine. After all, you are not alone in this world, can fully count on us. Beloved, you occupied an apartment on the 3rd floor of a new building. It was a real apartment with a second tier opening onto a balcony." Nancy was not well versed in the subtleties of modern architecture, so she was struck by the extraordinary organization of space. After looking at the apartment, she said to Vanessa with admiration, "I have no words. You can only see such luxury in the movies." Her older sister grinned. "You haven't seen real luxury. This is a nice apartment. We got it in such a shabby state that we don't want to remember it. My husband was in a trance when he first got here. I saw the opportunity right away, and as you can see, I was right. Honestly, I'm proud of this cozy apartment. It's my favorite thing about it. Feel free to come in and stay with us until you get bored. Come on, I'll show you your room." Vanessa led her sister behind her and stopped at the very end of the long corridor. It used to be a closet, but now it's a decent room for a young woman. "Can you take a shower and get to the table? I'll give you half an hour." Vanessa left. Nancy cautiously crouched down on the edge of the shaft-u. It was already as soft and pleasant to sit on as it had been over the years. I'd forgotten what a real bed looked like. The tears didn't come up. Her eyes and Nancy had to make an effort on herself to regain her composure. She whispered encouragement to herself not to drift. "Hopefully everything will be okay." "I'm going to take a shower," Sis advised. The sudsy jets of water hit her body, putting on memories of a very different life. She naively believed that that happiness was given to her on. But it turned out that the artificially created world can shatter in an instant into small shards. That's how China shatters, if you accidentally let it out of your hands. Nancy was younger than her sister by as much as 8 years. As a child, this difference had seemed enormous, and little Nancy looked upon faith as an adult. The older sister was diligent in her duties and taught the younger one about life. Nancy never swung for unattainable goals, counting on her spleen. "Then you'll be out of trouble. Remember, it's better to move slowly but surely than to run, stumbling and falling." At her young age, Nancy understood little of her older sister's lengthy speech. But Vanessa could speak beautifully, and that fascinated the girl. In 5th grade, she decided for herself to be like Vanessa. She's good at everything. What business won't she take on? She wanted to go to university, and she did. Nancy tried very hard to reach the level of her older sister, and if possible, to go a little higher. But this goal could only be achieved with complete determination, and there were so many interesting things around. In a word, Nancy tolerated, and then spit on all the previously accepted attitudes. "I will live with my own head. Vanessa is smart, but no one will marry her. And I want to find a guy who'll give me everything at once. Why go to all this trouble?" And Nancy didn't waste her energy. After graduating from high school, she enrolled in the Mechanical Engineering Institute because there was a shortage of applicants. But after a year, she dropped out. Her older sister found out about this deed only 6 months later. She didn't choose her words, scolding Nancy. "What do you think with your head or any other place? Today you can't go anywhere without a crust." Nancy objected many girls she knew had settled down quite well. For example, Maria was struggling from 2 to 3 at school, but she met a guy who had everything, and now she was rolling around like a cheese in butter. And Molly from the parallel class won the City Beauty Contest and now works as a model. Vanessa tried to prove to the naive fool that such happy stories usually end badly, and rich husbands leave their uneducated wives, and the professional activity of modeling is limited by age. Nancy didn't want to listen to her big sister. "Vanessa, I'm sick of you telling me what to do. And in fact, I think you are saying all this on purpose because you are jealous of me." The sister asked in surprise, "What is there to be jealous of? What about my youth and beauty? You'll be 26 soon, and you haven't gotten married. Is that an achievement, getting married?" Of course it is. Although Vanessa was very upset with her, she tried not to show her feelings. Her older sister made a few more attempts to change Nancy's mind, but then she waved goodbye. "Live your life as you wish. Just don't blame anyone for your failures later." But then, At 18, Nancy desperately believed in her luck for her great goal. She befriended the very same Molly who often shone her smile from the pages of fashion magazines. The former high school buddy pushed Nancy through the casting call, and she was noticed. First, luck screamed, and Nancy worked herself to the hilt for the camera. But she wasn't as lucky as Molly and had to star in cheap commercials, baby shampoos, and hygiene products. When she got tired of such humiliating work, she decided to protest. But what she heard back was, "You should be thankful you're getting such a lowly job. Girl, look at yourself in the mirror and you'll realize it. You've got an attractive face, but the rest of it, that's why she's making do with what she's got." It was a real bummer. It left Nancy in a prolonged state of despondency. She even had all sorts of bad thoughts. It is not known how her fate would have turned out in the future, if not for a chance meeting with Benjamin. That evening, she was just strolling through the city. Her mind, like her pockets, was empty. Nancy wondered where else she could go to earn a living. Suddenly, a luxury sports car stopped nearby, from which a man of about 35 years old jumped out. Apparently, he did not expect to meet on his way obstacles in the form of money. The girl also did not expect someone to jump on her and fell on all fours right into a puddle. The perpetrator of the accident began to apologize. "Young lady, believe me, I didn't mean to inconvenience you. Everything came out by accident." Nancy struggled to get up and was horrified to see her torn tights and shattered knee. Her eyes darkened with anger. "Did you accidentally walk out? Are you apologizing? I'm neither hot nor cold for your apology. These tights cost me half my paycheck, and now I have a broken knee. I can't walk normally." At the first serious accusation, the man started apologizing again. "Girl, honey, it's all fixable. Of course, except for the broken knee, I'll try to fix it. I'll make it up to you. Get in the car." He opened the door of the sports car, but Nancy shook his head. "And what's that? I'm not going anywhere with you. How do I know what's on your mind?" The man got out of the car again. "I hear you. You're doing the right thing. It never hurts to be extra vigilant." Nancy tried to get her closet into a less decent shape, but the dirty water had managed to disappear halfway down her coat, white in color. Her skirt and boots were also slathered in mud. The culprit of her fall for some reason stepped back 5 meters and concluded, "Yes, it's not a very pleasant picture. It seems that you, excuse me, lead an antisocial life." The insolence of the stranger made the girl mad, and she again switched to a familiar form of communication. "Listen, dude, you still have the conscience to joke. And if I called you now and in the mud, how would you look at it?" The young man, just in case, paid back and put his hands forward. "Girl, sweetheart, let's not go to extremes. We'll go with you now somewhere that sells clothes and you pick out anything you like." Hearing the code words, "anything you like," Nancy softened her tone a little. "Okay, I'll do it. There's a boutique nearby where you can buy everything, despite your not quite presentable appearance." Nancy confidently headed towards the store of branded clothes. The guard was reluctant to let her in at first, but after looking at her companion, he politely opened the door. "Welcome, Mr. Evans," Nancy asked in surprise. "Do they know you here?" The man answered nothing and led her to a row of clothes. "Choose anything you like." The girl fought for a long time with the desire to take away more, hanging with fashionable clothes. But the inner voice warned her against rash actions, and she took only a skirt, a reinforced jacket, and a pair of tights. As an example, the victim paid for new clothes. Only pantyhose she did not dare to put on, because the wound on her knees continued to bleed. The saleswoman came to the rescue. She handed her some tissues and bandages treated in leg. Nancy made herself a bandage and only then took out of the beautifully packaged brake tights, which was the main fashion trend. She fidgeted in front of the mirror for a long time, admiring her reflection, while only one thought swirled annoyingly in her head. This is probably how a fairy tale begins. I would give anything in the world that it never ends. Her experience in advertising came in handy, and she effectively walked out of the examples. The one whose fault the girl had to bathe in a puddle looked at her with undisguised admiration. After a moment's confusion, he pronounced the miraculous transformation of the ugly duckling into a queen. At this point, we should have started the fanfare. But for lack of musical accompaniment, I will, with your permission, play something suitable myself. The man began to imitate various musical instruments, and the staff of the store gave art. The new improviser with applause. Nancy did not see the amount her companion paid at the cash register. At that moment, her greatest concern was whether there would be a continuation of this miserable celebration. They left the store together, and a man right on the platform at the entrance extended his hand to her. Benjamin Evans, Nancy. The touch of the strong man's hand caused a storm of emotion in the girl's soul. After all, this was not a yellow mouth and her no, but a fully established man. Nancy had no experience with such people and was very much afraid of appearing primitive or ignorant. She had forgotten how she had scolded this man only an hour ago, and now she really wanted to please him. Benjamin watched her silently for a few minutes, but he was thinking about something of his own. Then he made a sudden suggestion. I don't think this evening would be complete without a cozy place for you and me. Tell me, what's your favorite? Did Nancy say ice cream and orange juice? That's great. So we're going to go to a cafe that serves your favorite treats. They sat at a table opposite each other, and Benjamin kept looking at her. For the first few minutes, Nancy felt a little stiff. But after a glass of champagne, the awkwardness disappeared. It seemed to her that she had known Benjamin for 1,000 years. The next day they met again, and just 2 months later they became husband and wife. On their wedding day, Nancy finally believed in a fairy tale. But she had forgotten then that fairy tales are bound to have negative characters in addition to good ones. Evans's country house, where the newlyweds settled, lived still widowed Mother Benjamin and his half-sister Lucy, with whom she from the first day did not develop a relationship. But the real personification of evil and perfidy was her husband's friend and companion. Kevin, the happy and very much in love young woman, did not know then that her happiness would last only 2 years, 3 months and 7 days. Nancy, you didn't fall asleep in there. Her sister's voice brought Nancy out of her trance state. She answered cheerfully, trying to shout over the sound of the water. I didn't fall asleep, but I almost passed out. Didn't even think it was possible to be happy about such simple things as a soft bed, a warm shower. I'll be right back. Hurry up. Your nephew's getting impatient. He's dying to meet his own aunt. Nancy threw on a wet-bodied terry cloth robe, which was hanging on the rack in the bathroom. I too, when I drove all the way here, I thought about how I would meet you and your son. I imagined different pictures, but in life everything rarely works out according to a preconceived plan. Vanessa was thinking about something of her own, and her little sister touched her shoulder lightly. Lucky, wake up. You just scolded me, and suddenly you're on the fritz. Is something bothering you? Ira nodded and begged. She looked at her sister again. There is one point on you only do not take offense, but you yourself understand that there is no need for a shot. And Ethan to know the details of your life. Something very heavy came over her shoulders. She looked her sister in the eye for a long time. Is that what you care about? You don't have to worry. I won't talk about my life. I'll keep quiet. Vanessa, I can have dinner somewhere else. Don't worry, I have some money, and I'm not burdened by my presence. Vanessa's face flushed with shame, and she began to justify herself. Nancy, why are you overreacting? I didn't say anything that's not inappropriate. I just asked Vanessa, and I'm asking you not to either. I understand. If I were you, I'd probably be worried that word of Bunny's ex moving into my house would spread all over town. Nancy, that's not what I meant. Robert's only 7 years old, and he doesn't understand a lot of things. And I'm not going to bring your son into my business. I'm just a temporary guest. I won't be here tomorrow. I promise. Nancy, why would you do that? I prepared a celebratory dinner in honor of your arrival. Ethan can't wait. He's prepared a toast. Well, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. It just came out of nowhere. Vanessa's eyes glittered suspiciously, and Nancy was tied in a tight knot. Her own pride walked down with her sister to the dining room. The evening passed homeward, warm and cheerful. Robert immediately found common ground and spilled all his secrets to her. Ethan made toasts, and at the end of the evening meal could barely move his tongue. Vanessa, with a practiced movement, threw his limp body on her back and said affectionately, "Let's go to bed." Is that how you outdid yourself tonight? At least a little distraction. The woman took her husband to the bedroom and soon returned. Don't worry, he's a good guy. It's just that his addiction is killing him. I checked him into rehab, but he ran away. They fished him out of the countryside 2 weeks later. Nancy, you wouldn't believe the time they were looking for my Solomon. I changed my mind. I'm surprised I survived, Nancy said quietly. Why don't you believe me? I believe you. I, too, have to find the person I love the most. Vanessa stared at her sister for a long moment. Nancy, maybe you shouldn't. Think about it. It's better to start over. You're still very young, and you've got everything ahead of you. I can't start a new life without my daughter. All these years in the colony and then in the settlement, I've been thinking about my little girl. She is my ray of hope in this unsightly darkness, which for some reason is called life. Vanessa looked away and nervously tugged at the edges of her sweater. If I understand you correctly, you're going to visit Evans. Just like that, Vanessa moved closer to her sister. Nancy, I didn't want to tell you before, but the thing is, they don't have your daughter. Nancy screamed, "What are you talking about? Where is she? Could she be?" She disappeared right after they arrested you. The next night or 24 hours later, but the baby's missing. She was snatched right out of the house. Grandma, Benjamin's mom, went to the kitchen to get formula. When she came back, the baby wasn't in the crib. There was a commotion and the police and dogs came. But they never found the girl. Vanessa, why didn't you tell me before? You knew and you didn't say anything. Why was I afraid it would break you completely? Nancy collapsed onto the back of the couch, her shoulders and back shuddering. Her sister realized she was sobbing without a man. Vanessa began stroking her, trying to soothe her. Nancy, get over it. Accept that fact. There's nothing you can do about it anyway. I can't ever accept it. Vanessa, it's so unfair. I've waited so many years for this day. This is the only Nancy I've lived for. I agree with you. It's not fair. Everything that happened to you 12 years ago is unfair. I don't believe then or now that your husband's death was your fault. But it's been years. You can't change anything now. Much to my regret. Nancy listened to her sister and nodded affirmatively. Yes, you're saying all the right things, but I don't want to accept it. I want to find my daughter, and I will find her. Even if I have to walk around the globe or go to the North Pole for that. I'm not afraid of any hardship. Vanessa, I have lived all these years with this idea that I have a daughter. I understand you perfectly well. But where will you look for her after all these years? The specialists couldn't do it then. What can you do? I'm a mother. I can do anything. My heart will definitely tell me the right decision. After the heart-to-heart talk, the sisters went to their rooms, but both of them did not close their eyes during the night. Early in the morning, Vanessa looked into the room where the sisters settled, and almost stunned Nancy stood at the threshold, stands skinny, traveling with a bag. Where did you pour that out for us? The guests grinned crookily. Thank you for the shelter, but I'll be going. I don't want to be a burden to you. Vanessa brought the passageway with her. I'm not letting you go anywhere. You know, I was up all night. I kept thinking, what can we do for you? And then this morning, I remembered Sam. He's a friend of my Ethan's. They used to box or run together. Nancy smiled. Probably running. Vanessa nodded understandingly. Yeah, my pimple's a lousy fighter, but his head works. You wouldn't believe it, but he's developed his own system and often wins. Sometimes it's a pretty decent amount of money. It's his day job. Oh, I didn't tell you. We're a family business. We bought a little restaurant when we first got married, and it's all thanks to my Ethan. He's a lawyer by training and knows the ins and outs of the law. And his friend Jindin used to be an investigator. Then he went private investigator. So I thought I should ask him for help. Nancy stood in the middle of the room at a loss. Her sister looked at her, sighed, and said with a chuckle, Don't be in a hurry. There's always time to leave. All right, I'll stay. Thank you, Vanessa. I haven't done anything to thank me yet. You are, and that alone means a lot to me. It means a lot to me too. But it's appropriate to use a phrase from a popular cartoon. You and I are sisters of the same blood, and we're destined to help each other." Nancy disappeared into her big sister's bosom and cried. She remembered how Vanessa had tried to instill in her, from a small age, the basics of life, how she had worried about her small failures and rejoiced at her successes. And then, when her mother died, Vanessa had cared for her as her own child. Her older sister had made many sacrifices for her. She was the one who supported her in every way possible during the hardest years, when Nancy was serving time for a crime she didn't commit. It was even frightening to think what would have happened to her if Vanessa had given up on her then. All of these thoughts were shyly in the young woman's mind. Vanessa was also at that moment thinking about how to restore her sister's will to live. "It's okay, Nancy, you and I will get through this. It's always easier together, and I'll never leave you." Sam considered himself a very successful man. He did not ask a lot from fate and used to be satisfied with what made his existence comfortable. He owned a small apartment and a car. He also had enough money for food and clothes. All this allowed Sam to lead a normal lifestyle, according to his concepts. Of course, in his youth, he had completely different plans, but the first 3 years of work in the internal affairs showed that he was not adapted to act at the stroke of someone's wand. Realizing this, a young investigator of one of the district departments of the regional center decided to open his own business. Although this idea was fraught with the risk of being left with nothing, Sam rushed into battle with an open fence. He rented a small basement for his office, launched advertising through social networks, and the business started. Ethan Simmons provided substantial help at first, and Sam felt it was his sacred duty to repay the Institute to his comrade in kind. Since Ethan was an avid gambler, he often got into tough messes, from which he had to pull him out. Many times, Sam tried to set Ethan straight. "Ethan, you're a grown man. It's time to come to your senses. You have a son growing up, and what kind of example are you setting for him?" Ethan, sighing heavily, usually answered in his unique voice, "I know it's bad, but it's a contagion. It's like an infection that gets into your brain and grinds it down every minute." Of course, Ethan couldn't be considered an avid gambler because at times he gave up this dirty business and went headlong into his restaurant business. But such periods were not long, and Ethan would fall back into his quarry. Yesterday, Simmons called him in the middle of the night, and his request was very puzzling. "Sam urgently needs your help. We need to find a man who disappeared without a trace 12 years ago." "Ethan, can't you wait till morning to make your call?" "I'm sorry, but I couldn't. I've got a lot on my plate, and you're the expert on mysterious disappearances." Indeed, in the first years of operational work, young investigator managed to solve 2 cases of many years ago. But quickly and unraveling mysterious disappearances was nothing surprising. Just Sam immediately saw what his senior colleagues missed. In other words, the soap eye effect, which is often found in the professional environment, worked in the investigation. The young operative did not suffer from this defect, so he quickly uncovered 2 records, did not leave them hanging. This event shocked the whole department, and they began to praise the guy at every turn. And others, on the contrary, scolded his viewer. Let nothing surprising. The kid wanted to serve before his superiors to get a star before the due date. To listen to such accusations was offensive, but to defend the honor of his good name did not allow strict adherence to the chain of command. That is why Sam tolerated unflattering comments of his colleagues. When he was promoted, detractors in general toughened and began to openly frame the guy in order not to become a victim of behind-the-scenes intrigue. After a short deliberation, wrote a report to the head of the district department. At first, he didn't want to let him go. He persuaded him to stay. "Sam, you're just at the beginning of your professional journey, so you're not good at everything yet. Believe me, as you gain experience, your perception of your profession will change. We've all been through this school." Brandon listened politely to his boss, but he didn't change his mind. Years later, he never regretted that he hadn't succumbed to his superiors' entreaties. Private investigation gave full freedom of action and was no less interesting than work in government agencies. Already in a year, Sam had his own clientele. Mostly, they were representatives of medium and small businesses, which were not given a quiet life. Competitors often turned for professional help deceived wives and husbands. But usually these were cases of current days, which were disclosed on fresh traces. So the woman's request did not arouse optimism in the detective's soul, although he encouraged his friend. "All right, Ethan, I'll check in with you in the morning." He thought that he would probably have to drop the case. After all, I'm not the only one in the private search business. There are people who specialize in finding missing relatives. With these thoughts, Sam rang the doorbell of his beloved's apartment, waiting to be greeted with the hospitality required in such cases. The door was opened by the landlady and immediately rejected. "Sam, we are looking forward to it. Come in, please. Now we will tell you everything, so to speak, from the first hand." The man followed the woman into the living room and immediately froze in place. On the sofa sat a young woman whose appearance immediately struck him. She had delicate facial features and unusually sad eyes. Ethan's wife introduced the stranger. "This is Nancy, my own sister. She's the one with the missing daughter. Perhaps it would be best if Nancy told you herself." Sam stared into the woman's bottomless eyes and could not tear his gaze away. He had forgotten all about his intention to give up a job that could take up a lot of his time. After a long pause, the man said in a steady voice, "I would like to know everything in detail, when it happened and under what circumstances." The older sister realized at once that her presence might interfere with a frank conversation. "You two talk, but I'll go and put the kettle on." "I'll put the kettle on. Sam, Ethan should be here soon. He went to the bank this morning." The guest reassured the woman. "All right, I'll wait for him. In the meantime, we'll have a word with your sister." Vanessa said Nancy, or Nancy, as you prefer. "My sister and I are simple people and don't pretend to be on special terms. It's for the best. After all, an open conversation gives much more than a formal conversation." When Vanessa left the drawing room, the man turned to Nancy, although it is incredibly difficult. "But try to remember everything in great detail." She looked directly into his eyes. After a second of confusion, Nancy said with apparent defiance, "Unfortunately, the details are unknown to me because the little girl disappeared right after my husband died. That is, he didn't die himself, but was helped." A gambling light appeared in Rindon's eyes. "Is that what you think? Or has the investigation established it?" The certainty was instantly gone, and Nancy lowered her eyes. "Your colleagues blamed me immediately. I wasn't even allowed to dress and feed my daughter. She was only 2.5 months old. She screamed, but they wouldn't let me see her. They handcuffed me and dragged me to the car. It was terrifying. The memories caused the poor woman pain and suffering." Nancy tried to hold back her tears, but it was very difficult for her to do so. "I'm sorry, Sam, but I can't keep my emotions in check. It's been so many years, but it's still like a pain in the ass. I understand you very well, and I will try to help you. But I would really like to hear more about your relationship with your husband. How did the family receive you?" "He had relatives." "Yes, of course. Benjamin, Lily's mother. She's a very nice, kind woman. She took me right away as her own daughter. And things were great with Benjamin, too. He and I never even had a serious fight in all that time," interrupted a woman. "Wait, Benjamin Evans, the famous hotelier, was your husband?" Nancy smiled. "Yeah, and you knew him a little." "I was an experienced young man when Evans was basking in his glory, but I remember well the buzz about his death. The men in our department at the time were very surprised that it was closed very quickly. Turns out you've been named as the lead defendant. That's how it works. Nobody even wanted to listen to me. The investigator who was in charge of the case asked only provocative questions. Somebody told him that Benjamin had a mistress. I made him jealous the day before. There was an incident like that. No. I still remember it as clearly as if it happened yesterday. I don't mean the day Benjamin died, but what happened the day before. We were invited to the banquet by Benjamin's friend Kevin. They'd been friends since high school, and then Benjamin took over the company when his dad died. So out of the goodness of his heart, Benjamin asked him to be his partner. Of course, I never got into my husband's business, so I'm telling you what I learned from him." Sam made an approving sign with his hand. "Take your time. Try to remember the little things, often the unimportant ones. At first glance, details help to solve the crime. Until what time were you at the banquet? Nancy answered without hesitation. We left Kevin's at 10 p.m. Benjamin wanted to stay longer, but I was worried about my daughter. We had a little argument about it, and Kevin even tried to calm us down. He succeeded in reconciling us. We had another glass of champagne and drove home. I felt sick in the car, and my husband asked the driver to stop. I went outside for some fresh air, and we drove on. That is, the village. Basically, all at home I immediately collapsed into bed because I was very tired and felt deathly weak. I remember I told my husband about it, and he was very surprised, as he was experiencing a similar sensation. Nancy smiled at her memories. Benjamin had made a joke, saying that we had been fed something that made us sleepy. He went straight to the bedroom, and I still had enough energy to take a shower. When I came back from the bath, Benjamin was already in a blissful sleep. He hadn't even changed his clothes since his daughter had been taken to her room by her mother-in-law. I decided not to disturb Lily. Nancy decided to take another break. Sam understood how hard it was for this young woman to remember. He really wanted to cheer her up, but he couldn't find the words that would soothe the mother's heart even a little. She asked me, "Should I go on or is it enough?" No, go ahead. I would like to know why the operatives came to the conclusion that it was you who took the life of your husband. The woman took a deep breath, as if about to dive into the water. I woke up to my mother-in-law screaming. Lucy was screaming too. Stop. There's a new character in your story. Who is it? Lucy, Lily's daughter from her first marriage. Benjamin's mom jumped out of her first marriage at 18. Stupid high school sweetheart. They split up later. Daughter Lucy stayed with her mother. Benjamin's father did the honorable thing and adopted her from Lily. I didn't see her much because Lucy was abroad all the time. Did she have a business or a job there? I'm not sure. And to be honest, I wasn't really interested in the life of a spectacle. She was all tough, all socialite. So you're saying you don't have a relationship with your husband's half-sister? I wasn't trying to impose my society on Lucy. I don't like people who pretend to be something they're not, when in reality, they're just empty inside. Lucy's empty too. Even Lily wasn't very good with her, even though she's her own daughter. By the way, that husband's sister was the loudest one that morning, screaming that I was the one who sent Benjamin to the other side of the world. Pardon me, but the weapon was found. Nancy looked at her hands and hid them immediately. They were common and nice, but it is unknown how they ended up in my hand. When I woke up, I didn't realize what was going on. But even then, I had those damn scissors in my hand. The woman threw herself on the back of the couch. Sam, I can't take it anymore. It's very hard. Let's stop, of course. You've told me enough today, and I even know where to begin our investigation. She asked in an indifferent tone. Where? I want to talk to Evan's neighbors, coworkers, past and present. Your late husband. It would be nice to talk to Lily too. That won't be possible. My mother-in-law died of a heart attack shortly after all this happened. I didn't even get to visit her grave, and Benjamin was buried without me too. Sam saw that Nancy was ready to cry again, but Ethan returned. So they had to cut the conversation short. The man secluded himself in his lover's room, and Nancy went to the kitchen, where her sister was already wielding a knife. Vanessa, let me help you. Yes, I will correct myself now. I will send all this beauty in cabbage with oil, and it will be possible to taste my specialty salad. After the bright speech, the elder sister looked at Nancy and almost cried herself when she saw in what condition the unfortunate one was. Putting aside the implements of labor, Vanessa hugged her sibling relative. How can you look like you've been put through a washing machine? Sam is very experienced. He is a true master of his craft. Trusting him, Nancy exhaled. I don't have any other options. You were right when you said I couldn't do it alone. Vanessa suddenly winked slyly. Hey, did you notice Sam looking at you like that? I can't even find the words, but it's a hard look. I think he liked you. He's single, by the way, so he's not missing an opportunity to get to know Vanessa. I'm not in a situation to have an affair. I have a daughter to find. The landlady grumbled, and one thing does not prevent another. That night, Nancy fell asleep earlier than usual. The excitement, the nervous tension, had sapped her strength. But Nancy came out. In her dream, she saw children playing ball by the seashore. One girl caught the ball and held it out to her mother to play with me. When she woke up with a wet pillow, she realized that she had been crying in her dream. This fact stunned the woman because it was the first time this had happened to her. Sam called 3 days later to find out something, and I had a sniff. I guess I was on the trail. But a very urgent matter has come up, and I can't refuse to help my good friends. By the way, there's a girl missing out there too. She went to a competition in the regional center, and there she slipped away with her instrument. What kind of musical instrument? She's learning to play the violin, and they send her to competitions all the time. That's what her mom told me. It's been 2 days. I haven't heard a peep from you guys. I understand everything, Sam. I can imagine how worried the child's parents are. Help them out. I'll wait. No, I'm taking you on a special assignment to a place with a romantic name. But more than 10 years ago, there was an emergency there that stirred up the whole neighborhood. This case was even written about in the local press. So you can go online. Or should I ask Ethan? If in a nutshell, a local resident went to the river laundry from the floor to sleep, and there is a shoebox with an infant. Nancy felt she was having trouble breathing, and what about this baby? I have no idea, but I think you should pay a visit to this very place. It's time to ask the old-timers. Maybe that woman is still alive. It's not far by train or bus, is it? Nancy thanked the private investigator for the useful information and began to hurriedly pack. Vanessa, I have to leave for a while on our detective's errand. The older sister raised her eyebrows in surprise. Oh, this is getting interesting. Where are you going to go to investigate? There's a village not far away with a very funny name. Sam said that about 10 years ago, a small child was found in the river there. And what do you think? It's your daughter. Babies are dropped off almost daily, so don't get your random facts out of whack. Vanessa, the timing is consistent. It was August, and Benjamin died in August. It still doesn't prove anything. Even if the intruders took the child, why would they drive a few hundred kilometers to pick him up? Well, it's possible, though. We don't know why they kidnapped your daughter. Go to it. Or if you want, wait till the weekend, and I'll take you out. No, I have to go tonight. Nancy made it home without adventure. The village looked like a series of gingerbread houses, the kind you often see in illustrations in children's books. As a child, she herself had dreamed of living in such a house and painted platbans. The woman walked along the street, but did not see a single living soul. She involuntarily burst out a question. I wonder if anyone lives here or has everyone left. She did not expect anyone to answer her half-whispered question, but a cheerful female voice sounded from somewhere off to the side. We had few survivors left, and even fewer walkers. Nancy began to turn her head, and the rustling of leaves was heard around. Then a woman about 50 years old appeared. She had a handful of seeds in the palm of her hand, and she deftly threw a few into her mouth. There was a distinctive sound, and immediately the husks flew onto the country road. At that moment, Nancy suddenly remembered that it was forbidden to litter in public places. In the colony, one could be put in the punishment cell for such things. Probably her look was so eloquent that the villagers unraveled it. Everyone here is spitting on the cleanliness of the streets, and we only have 2 of them. You can count the inhabitants on your fingers. So we have to fight boredom with various means. They're good at calming everyone down. I immediately buy several packs to spare. Oh, why am I talking to you about stove seeds? You must have come here on business. Nancy got worried. Yes, I read on the internet that you found a baby in a box here about 10 years ago. I'd like that. The women joyfully welcomed the newcomer back into their arms. This impulse stunned Nancy, and she tried to free herself, but the villagers were not embarrassed by the newcomer's behavior. She cheerfully clambered for the territory. You've come right to the right place. It was me and Aunt Clara who caught that box. There was a pretty girl on it, painted and written in a foreign language. Nancy felt the blood rush to her head. Benjamin had given her low-heeled boots before her daughter was born because her feet had been severely cut off in the last few months of her pregnancy. The gift came in a brightly colored box, and her husband quite remarked, "Specially ordered just for you just yesterday, this exclusive pair arrived from Italy," meaning they're handmade. The boots cost a fortune. Nancy put the boots on right away and threw the box in the closet. "Hey, where'd you go?" "Been here and gone." The woman was sewing Nancy's sleeve. "Is there anything else you're interested in?" Did Nancy lose her numbness? "Yes. I'd like to know what happened next." She rolled her eyes. "There was nothing. Aunt Clara's husband, they have him in that house on the river." That is, Clara also lived with a poet and a sorrowful poet. And Sevastianov is already in his second year. How did he introduce himself? "If you wish, I'll take you to the Broad." "Thank you. I don't think that's necessary. You've told me everything you can." "Tell me, is that box still there by any chance?" Zelenka gave another triumphant cry. "I thought at the time that the time would come when people would ask about that box. Aunt Clara threw it away at once for no reason. It was too much cardboard. And I picked it up. I really liked the girl in the picture and even cut it out. Do you want me to show you?" "I want to show you." "Then follow me. My name is Wendy." Nancy could barely keep up with her village guide. She did not take in what the cheerful woman was telling her, as she had little interest in life by the sea. In the fall, the landlady invited her into the house, and the guests at once saw in the dark hallway a fragment of a brightly colored box. Now she had none left. That in that box was her little daughter. Now it remained to find out who had decided to massacre her defenseless daughter in such a brutal way 12 years ago, and also very much wanted to know in what orphanage the little girl was sent. But could not answer exactly to this question. Who knows? Probably taken to the district hospital first. There used to be a children's ward there, but maybe they send it straight to the city. No one can answer that now. The district police officer has changed, and the new one doesn't know anything about that story. "Thank you for the detailed story." Nancy considered her mission accomplished, but the landlady tugged at her sleeve again. "Where do you think you're going? Don't be in a hurry to stay with me for half an hour. I've just given you some tea with these pens. When I'm bored, I give up all custody. I used to work in the cafeteria at the high school. I learned to bake there." Nancy didn't want to offend this kind woman, so she accepted her invitation. Aunt Wendy talked passionately about village life as she drank her herbal tea and pens with relish. She didn't notice how the time flew by. Only casually glancing at the clock, she couldn't believe her eyes. "Oh my God, it's 6:30 p.m. I've missed the bus." Aunt Wendy readily offered to let you stay the night. "And then you can go in the morning." "No, I have to go back to town today." "Why are you in such a hurry?" Nancy was confused. She couldn't tell this from a complete stranger about the purpose of her visit. But Wendy had a discreet voice. She stared at her guest for a moment, then slapped herself on the knee. "Oh, well, I'm an old fool. Don't you dare. What's the price?" "Was that box really your daughter in it?" Nancy whispered. "Yeah, you guessed it. It was my little girl. She was only 2.5 months old. Me and the women thought Mother Cuckoo planted the box. So it turns out your baby was stolen from you. It turns out that way. What about me? What's going on in the world? How can we go on living? I'll walk you to the train station. The train stops there for a minute, but you're young enough to catch it on time, and she'll be there in 40 minutes. Aunt Wendy led her a short way through a small wood. Nancy could hardly keep up with her and thought at that age such a sprightliness could only be envied in this woman. But she immediately pictured the empty Maria Street and realized there was nothing to envy. The electric train arrived right on schedule. Nancy said a warm goodbye to Wendy and promised to visit her if she could. It was cool in the half-empty car, and Nancy decided to move to the next car. Maybe there would be more passengers there and it would be warmer. She stepped out into the vestibule and immediately heard the wistful sounds of a violin. She wanted to know who was entertaining the passengers. The next carriage was much warmer and the few passengers were listening like a girl, a teenager playing the violin. Nancy herself had attended music school in her distant childhood and was even prophesied to have a creative future. But she never thought about a career as a musician. The girl perfectly mastered the instrument and masterfully performed well-known works. Having finished playing, she carefully put the violin in a modest case. Nancy had unmistakably identified it as a piece of junk that could be purchased in any specialty store. The thought flashed through her mind that the girl clearly had talent. Too bad she has to make money this way. She tossed a few coins onto the case. The other passengers donated to the young musicians as well, whoever could spare as much as they could. Nancy sat by the window and soon passed out. She remembered the day gone by and thought about what to do next. The train jerked and a metallic voice announced the final citizenship. Passengers are kindly requested. Do not forget your belongings in the carriage. Since Nancy had set off at Marussi's Marussi was light on her feet. She let this appeal pass her ears. The clock above the station entrance showed 7:45. And Nancy thought probably Vanessa and Ethan are already worried and Robert. I promised to show you how to make paper. It turns out I've tricked him, because by the time I get there, it'll be 9 o'clock. Before Nancy could scold herself properly, she heard someone's noisy breathing behind her. She wanted to turn around, but at the same time there was a ringing voice. "Auntie, may I walk with you for a little while?" Nancy answered machine quickly she could, and only then did she stop. The voice belonged to a young violinist, who only half an hour ago had been entertaining the public in the train by playing the violin. A bad feeling crept into the woman's soul. "Wait a minute, why are you alone?" the girl replied defiantly. "I am old enough to move around the city unaccompanied, but if you are so interested, I can tell you that I am returning home from my grandmother's, where my loving parents are waiting for me." During her years in the colony, Nancy had learned to distinguish lies from truth. There was no sincerity in the girl's voice, and she didn't believe her. "Tell me, do your parents know that you earn money in the electric trains?" This question caught the girl off guard, which was evident on her face. But she kept lying anyway. "Auntie, I didn't do anything like that." "Is it a crime to play on the train?" "Of course not. But you're too young to earn money that way. I was just playing. A woman gave me a candy bar, and that's all. I didn't take any money." The girl's whole light was protesting, and her insolence was astounding. The teacher woke up. "How are you not ashamed to lie? I myself personally put a few coins on the case." The girl grumbled, "Could have thrown at least rubles. 100 is money. All adults are greedy to the point of disgust. And my so-called daddy bought up too." It was like an electric shock ran through Nancy's body. "Hey, violinist, you didn't run away from home, did you?" The girl froze for a few seconds with her mouth hanging open. Nancy rushed after the young stranger, and then they were gone. For about half an hour, she walked about the square in Nancy to see the little moon, but only wasted her time. "Yes, Aunt Nancy, hello. You screwed up all the way home." She thought about the two encounters she'd had today, both seemingly random, but there was something about them that kept Nancy on her toes. Before she could even touch the bell, the apartment door swung open. Vanessa pounced on her with reproach. "Where the hell have you been? We've been worried sick. We don't need you to be missing." Nancy kissed her sister. "Don't square. It's a good thing I caught the train, or I'd have had to spend the night in the countryside or even in an empty field. You have no idea what I've learned." Of course, it wasn't without its adventures. Vanessa patted her shoulder. "Okay, you'll tell me later. For now, I'll feed you dinner. Although normal people don't eat at this late hour, I'm not really hungry. My mother fed me with these hands in the fall from a very kind aunt. By the way, she told me a lot of interesting things." "Do you know where your girl is?" Nancy waved her hands. "Alas, no. On the contrary, I'm still more confused. But there is a certainty that my little girl is alive." Vanessa shook her head and cautiously remarked to Nancy, "12 years have flown by. And your daughter is definitely not a baby anymore." The smile slowly slid off the woman's face. "You know, I hadn't really thought about it. In my mind, she's still a tiny little lump of pink." Sam called. "He had some news for you too. He even wanted to stop by, but when he heard you were gone, he changed his mind. You've clearly hurt a man's heart." Nancy blushed. "Vanessa, don't make up things that aren't there. Sam just really wants to help me. I think he's a very decent man." Nurse muttered. "Decent people fall in love too. It's not forbidden by law, only in bed. Nancy remembered that she had not had time to tell her sister about the adventure in the train car. As she fell asleep, she thought it's all right. I'll tell you tomorrow. I wonder where the violinist is now and why her parents are so negligent of their duties. In the morning, the impressions left after yesterday's trip had dulled a little. Nancy no longer found it strange that a girl unknown to her was earning money by playing in a train carriage. So at breakfast, she spoke briefly only of the trip to Maria. Together with her sister Nancy, escorted the race to the door of the school. The boys looked at her hopefully. Aunt Nancy, and you won't run today. I promised yesterday to show the boys a paper crane. Nancy felt ashamed that she had let her nephew down. You want me to pick you up from school and we'll go straight to the cranes. Robert was delighted at the offer. I want to. Aunt Nancy, you just show me and I'll do it myself. I can put things together fast. That's what Mom says, and so does the teacher. Robert disappeared behind the school fence, and Vanessa pulled her sister along. Get in the car, Mary Poppins. I'll keep you under lock and key until tonight so you don't fool my kid again. He's very sensitive. He only gets offended by women for every little thing. We made it home. As we pulled up, he handed the sisters each a small bunch of flowers. Perhaps it's not quite appropriate in this situation, but I don't want to be rude. Vanessa was on a roll. Thank you, Sam. You've shortened this boring morning. My Ethan has completely forgotten that his wife should get flowers once in a while. I hope you're here with some news. Yes, I did manage to find out something once the three of us were in the apartment. Nancy suddenly asked, Did you find the missing girl? I was surprised. I don't understand. Which girl are you talking about? The one your friends are looking for. You must have forgotten that you told me about it yesterday. Yes, I forgot. I'm under a lot of pressure at the moment, so I can't keep it all in my head. But thanks for the reminder. By the way, it's an amazingly interesting case. Can you imagine a 12-year-old girl deciding to go on the run? She had been working out a plan for a long time and decided to implement it during a trip to the contest. Nancy asked, What pageant? Sam shrugged. I didn't really understand it myself, but something to do with music. In short, the girl has several talents, including criminal ones. After the event, she wasn't on the bus. The police were called immediately, but nothing concrete. The mom's a black cloud. She's a good friend of mine. Vanessa asked about the dad. Probably doesn't care. There's a separate story with the father. Just before his daughter disappeared, he said he was leaving her for another woman. That's probably what caused her to run away. Little adventurous. Sam suddenly exclaimed to O. I've got a picture. I pulled a color photograph out of my pocket. Nancy looked at the photograph, and her face turned white as a sheet. The detective noticed the woman swaying and rushed over to her. Are you ill? An indignant smile appeared on the unfortunate woman's face. It's nothing. A little dizzy. It'll pass. I just didn't expect to see this photo. After all, I had just talked to this girl last night and even scolded her. I immediately suspected something was wrong with her. The older sister and the man looked at each other in surprise. The man picked up the photograph that had fallen out of Nancy's hands from the floor. I think our joint investigation is taking an interesting turn. Please tell me about yesterday's meeting. Nancy had already gained complete control of herself and described the scene in the train carriage in detail. She ended her narrative with the words, If I had known that her mother was looking for this girl, I would not have let her go, or I would have gone straight to the police. Try to reassure the client not to make a fuss in vain. If I were you, I'd do exactly the same thing. And after all, you can't catch every teenager in town. They usually have them in the evenings. Ira was more than willing to give me a hint. Hardy near our entrance too. Every night young people gather and can make noise until midnight. It was noticeable that Nancy was thinking hard about something. The older sister was about to continue the topic of youth gatherings, but Sam looked at her expressively. He realized how difficult it was for this woman to understand everything that was going on. And after all, she had been through so much turmoil in just the last few days. And that was without taking into account the years that the unfortunate ones had to spend in prison. Aang had asked his friend, with whom he had once worked together, to raise the case of the businessman Evans. It was true that so far he had only familiarized himself with it superficially, but some blatant points spoke of a gross violation of the investigative process. He did not want to burden the women with unnecessary information because he wanted to understand everything himself first. But he decided to share one thought with Nancy. "Don't get me wrong, but I had an idea to introduce you to Adriana's mom." She didn't immediately realize who she was talking about, so she asked Adriana again. "Yes, the missing girl's name is Adriana, short for Adriana. If my guess is correct." "No, it's correct. I wanted to ask you to arrange a meeting with the girl's mother. After all, we're friends in need and will understand each other. Besides, I'll be able to tell her that I saw her daughter on the train, that she's alive and well. I think it will calm her down a little bit. Thanks for understanding." Nancy's mom is a good friend of mine. A long time ago, we lived in the same neighborhood and even went to school together. Then my parents got an apartment in a new neighborhood and Nancy moved to another city. But we always kept in touch with her. Unfortunately, her family life didn't work out so well. In short, the poor thing was suffering. And then two misfortunes coincided. Her husband left her and her daughter disappeared. So she's in desperate need of support right now. Brendan promised to contact Nancy soon. But before that, he wanted to find out about the two characters who had so far remained in the shadows. The meeting in the main office of the Vega Corporation was coming to an end when the cell phone on the CEO's desk began to vibrate. Kevin glanced unhappily at the gadget, but did not answer the call. To keep his mind on the meeting agenda, he tossed the cell phone into the desk drawer. The subordinates were glad for the unexpected pause, but Kevin did not let them relax. "I want to remind everyone here that discipline is paramount. Each of you has a responsibility to support the common cause and motivate your departments to do the same." As if on cue, the department heads started making notes in their notebooks. Kevin enjoyed his moment of greatness and looked down on everyone. He liked to be understood half-heartedly, but he liked to be obeyed even more. Even in his high school years, Kevin made bids for leadership, but he couldn't compete with Benjamin Evans. Not him, but Benjamin was always sent to the Olympiads and various forums. Evans had a phenomenal memory, so it was easier for him to study. The girls were crazy about him too. They didn't pay attention to Kevin. His bitter father also had a prominent position in the city, and Kevin's parents lived from paycheck to paycheck. But all these disadvantages did not prevent the boys from being friends. True, everyone had a different concept of friendship. Benjamin believed that with a comrade should share the joys and give him a shoulder in a difficult hour. And Kevin sought only benefits from such a relationship. But Kevin skillfully concealed his thoughts and for decades nurtured a plan to outdo his rival. The first time Kevin put a friend a pig when he was going to marry a girl he also liked. In order to upset the wedding, Kevin went rogue. He decided to get irrefutable dirt against Benjamin's fiancée. To this end, he invited the girl to a birthday party and got her drunk. When she fell senseless on the couch, arranged a photo shoot with the participation of another scumbag. The very next day, as if by accident, he planted the racy photos on a friend. Later, when Benjamin was tearing up with anger, "How could she do that to me? I trusted her like I trusted myself." Kevin came at first call to comfort fellow Benjamin. All lovers are blind, and you too are blinded by a strong feeling. But don't despair. You will meet a girl who will be worthy of being your wife for almost 15 years. Benjamin was afraid to get serious with the farer. Kevin was also having mixed success on the personal front. But thanks to a friend, he'd made a name for himself, and it was after Evans asked him to be his partner. "Kevin, you don't have to do much of anything. Your only job is to keep your nose to the wind." Kevin needed no further explanation. He immediately set about establishing strict order in the company. Benjamin's father had just died, and he appreciated Kevin's help. "I had no idea you were such a good organizer. If this keeps up, I'm going to promote you to the board of directors." It was the height of careerist aspirations. But as time went on, Benjamin seemed to forget about his promise. And then Kevin learned from third parties that his friend met some uneducated wiretap and was going to marry her. He couldn't help himself and expressed his resentment to Evans. "Benjamin didn't expect you. I thought we were friends. And you didn't even tell me you had a girlfriend." Benjamin was surprised. "I don't think my personal life is anyone's business. And anyway, Kevin, childhood is a thing of the past. You have to look at life as an adult. Okay, Benjamin and I will take note, and I won't bother you anymore." After the wedding, Benjamin became completely estranged from his friend. He stopped sharing his plans with him, which suggested the end of the trust limit. The resentment accumulated day by day imperceptibly degenerated into hatred. Kevin's inventive mind began to think over a plan of another mischief when he unexpectedly found an accomplice in the person of his half-sister Benjamin. Lucy has long made ambiguous signs of attention, but he tried not to notice them. For one thing, the friend's sister was much older than he was. But the main drawback was her not tolerable character. She even brought her own mother to a heart attack more than once. The combination of all these reasons made Kevin behave with Lucy extremely cautiously. But everything changed after the wedding of a friend. Kevin noticed right away that Evans had gone cold on him. And then Lucy added fuel to the fire. One evening after a family tea party, she caught him in the hallway. "Kevin, can I have a word with you?" He had the right manners, so he answered, "Of course you may. What man can refuse when he's asked for something? Pretty woman." Lucy flirtatiously waved her eyes. "Although you're lying out of your ass. But it still feels good." "Me too. So what was it you wanted to tell me?" Lucy moved closer to him. "I overheard Benjamin talking to someone on the phone. He said he was planning to reorganize the company, cut the man. You're smart, and you know very well that such events usually involve downsizing. I've noticed your brother hasn't been very forthcoming with you lately. I think his own blood is affecting him badly. Is it excitement, pulse, temples, and Kevin?" asked Lucy. "You laid it all out to me for a reason." The woman pressed herself against him. "You got it right. I want justice, and I'm not used to being second best." Lucy sank her lips into his. Everything further happened by inertia, and Kevin found himself in Lucy's bed. But her passion quickly faded and she changed to a businesslike tone. "Kevin, you and I can form a mutually beneficial alliance. Our interests are aligned." "True," he grudgingly replied. "I guess we do. But I don't know where you're going with this yet." She lightly touched the tip of his nose with her finger. "Okay, you get it. It's written all over your forehead that you hate Benjamin. I've hated him since I was a kid too, because he took my mom and his wife away from me. I despise her too. I can't stand the sound of her voice. Stupid sheep. You don't know your buddy's gonna be a daddy soon, do you? Hee hee. How do you know such details?" How? "From a camel, my classmate. My ex works at the clinic. She told me. That's the reason I decided to stay here." "Lucy, can you answer one question honestly? Please, you have business overseas. Isn't that enough for you?" Lucy couldn't stop laughing for 5 minutes. "Kevin, is this the business of meetings, dogs, and kitties? I had this piece thrown at me to shut me up, and Benjamin got the whole pie, and I have to make it right. And you're gonna help me." "You will." "Yeah, I did." The accomplices began working on a plan. They came up with several options, but each had major flaws, so time worked against them. They had to take drastic action shortly after the Evanses gave birth to their daughter. Lucy was on the verge of panic. Kevin just a little more and all would be lost. Benjamin's secretary told me in confidence that Benjamin had a long discussion with his lawyer the other day. My heart tells me he's going to write a will. You on the board can find out. The man promised well. I'll try to find out, because Kevin never took the easy way out. He went tricky again and invited a friend's lawyer he knew to a restaurant. There he gave him a good meal and extracted the necessary information. The lovers decided to act immediately. Kevin's anniversary was just around the corner. Lucy slipped a potent sleeping pill into the glasses of the spouses, hoping that they will quickly get tired and it will be possible to simulate a road accident. But the wife was in a hurry to get home. When the drug had not yet had time to take effect, they had to change the plan on the fly. Memories of that terrible evening caused a stigma, horror, and disgust in the soul. Although 12 years have passed, but he clearly remembers how Lucy stabbed the axe Benjamin under the ribs. Then she had cold-bloodedly laid the implement in sleeping Nancy's hand. The CEO's thoughts were interrupted by a suspicious sound. Kevin began to look around and even looked under the desk. Then he pulled out a desk drawer. "Buddy, it's a simple one. Completely forgot I had pushed you in there." He sighed heavily. He said, "Yes, I'm listening to you." "No, I couldn't answer right away. I had a meeting." "You know about it very well that you are sure? Or is it another rumor again?" "Okay, I'll check it out, and please don't get ahead of yourself." Kevin turned off his phone and froze in his chair in an uncomfortable pose. Lucy had just informed him that the DA's office had reopened the old Evans death case, seeking accomplices, and announced that the private investigator was questioning their old housekeeper who had worked at Evans' house for many years. The man's eyes darkened and his throat was crushed by an invisible hoop. He wanted to reach for the phone to call the receptionist, but he didn't have time because suddenly darkness fell upon him. The last thing Kevin thought about was the thought that any evil would not go unpunished. The secretary was worried by the lack of signs of life in the principal's office. Only at the end of the working day, the girl thought that the chief was asleep and half quietly called Kevin. "Can I get you some coffee?" But there was no answer. Then the girl, after a long hesitation, decided to come closer. She realized that the chief was dead and loudly screamed X-ray. Already in the evening of the same day learned of the death of one of the conspirators. He thought that the punishment had caught up with one criminal, but the accomplice would also get his. The meeting between Nancy and Nancy took place the very next day. By all accounts, he called his buddy to reassure her and told her that Nancy had seen her. When the doorbell rang, Nancy was home. The one woman who stood at the door immediately liked her such an open, slightly frightened look. "Please excuse me, Nancy. I won't take up much of your time. You just tell me how my Adriana looked. Is she doing well?" It wasn't until she said that Nancy realized who she was looking at. "You're Nancy, aren't you?" "Yes, I am." "Come in. I'll make some tea and we'll have a talk." While Nancy was making tea, Nancy said, "You see, you probably think I've been mean to my daughter and that's why she ran away. It's not like that. I would do anything for her. She's my whole world. But my father and I didn't get along. He couldn't love her, no matter how hard I tried. But every year he grew to hate her. I'd like to tell her that Daddy doesn't live with us anymore, that she has to go home. I'll be sure to answer all her questions." Nancy finally paused, and Nancy managed to say, "Don't burn yourself. It happens to teenagers. They're all extremes at that age. No halftones. Everything's gonna be okay. I don't understand about the questions. You still have something. Look, I'm not trying to judge you, but I hope I find my daughter someday. How do you communicate? What kind of questions do they have? What are the concepts?" Nancy sighed. "You see, Adriana is not our own daughter. We adopted her when we found out we weren't going to have children of our own. Or rather me. I didn't want my daughter to find out at all. But my husband opened her eyes wide. He didn't tell her. It's just that when we fought, Martin was never one to hold back on the language. Lately, he's been yelling that he's sorry we took Lena. It's not that Adriana's a wonderful girl. She just has a lot of resentment right now. We don't necessarily need to find her so she doesn't do anything wrong." Nancy put her hand on Nancy's arm. "You will definitely find her, we will. We'll start walking around town in the evenings from today. There's no way we won't meet her." Nancy wiped her eyes, looked at Nancy. Sam was not mistaken. "You really are a very wonderful and kind woman." Nancy was embarrassed. For a week now, she and Nancy had been walking around town in the evening, skirting bus stops, alleyways, parks. A couple of times they heard people say that there was a violinist playing in the street somewhere, but they were late both times. Adriana was already gone. Nancy kept trying to cheer Natasha up. She had already bonded with the woman and was no less worried about her daughter than Nancy herself. This time they sat on a bench in the park. Nancy called Sam, asked where they were, and told him to stay put. He showed up 15 minutes later and started talking right away. "I've been under a lot of pressure lately. Nancy, let's start with you first. Lucy was arrested last night. She's the one responsible for her brother's death, and she's the one who organized the whole thing with the help of her lover. It's Kevin. Yes, it is, and for some reason I thought it was. Oh, Adriana saw them too. She didn't know what to do, whether to run away from her mom or run to her mom. Nancy shouted to Adriana, "Daughter, Daddy doesn't live at home anymore. He has left. Please come back." Nancy powerlessly sank down on the bench and cried. Adriana stood for a second longer and then rushed to her. "Mama, don't cry. Don't cry." Mama Nancy turned away. Jesus, maybe there would come a time when she could hug her daughter like that. Sam's phone rang. He answered it and smiled. "I suggest we continue the conversation at Vanessa and Nancy's. Vanessa just called to say she had set the table." Nancy looked at Sam in surprise. Vanessa didn't say anything about having an event today. Nancy stood up. "We'll go. Let's not get in the way." Sam shook his head negatively. "No, you should definitely attend as well." Seeing the two women and the girl staring at him in amazement, Sam spread his hands. "I'll explain everything, but it's better to do it at home." Vanessa, as soon as they entered, immediately began to invite everyone to the table. She was so fidgety that Nancy immediately suspected that her sister was aware of what Sam wanted to tell. At first, there was silence at the table. Then Nancy couldn't stand it any longer. "Sam, you'll forgive me if Lucy confesses." "Yes, Nancy, you'll be exonerated. Plus, you'll get your business back, all the Evans family property." Nancy smiled sadly. "I would give it up without regret to keep Benjamin alive and to find my daughter." Sam set his fork aside. "But it was time to continue my story. After Benjamin died, you went to prison, and Benjamin's mother died of a heart attack. There was only one obstacle left in the way of money. Is this your daughter?" Nancy shuddered. Sam's words sounded so ominous. Lucy and Kevin had decided to get rid of her altogether. Apparently, there was still some humanity left in them, if only a little, and they couldn't do it themselves. They decided she had to die on her own. They drove to the first village they could find and threw the baby in the river. At least it was in a box. By a happy coincidence, the box was fished out in time by local women. Lucy and Kevin put on a comedy act. Lucy sobbed on camera, cursing those who had stolen her only kidney. Kevin promised to tear to pieces those who did this to his best friend's daughter. The girl was never found. Maybe they weren't looking for her. Gradually, things quieted down. Lucy and Kevin became full-fledged business owners, at the same time pretty far away from this Colorado. One family made the decision to adopt or foster a child. More, of course, the wife wanted it. But the husband wasn't opposed to it either. They were very fortunate to be offered a child. The main thing is a perfectly healthy girl. The couple quickly settled all the formalities and became parents. True, the father very quickly realized that all this he does not like, and that he is used to be in the house of the Maine. And now the main thing is some dog. And it wasn't even his own. Now Nancy looked at him with uncomprehending eyes. Vanessa already had her hand on the pike. It was like she was waiting for something, and nothing happened. Nancy could feel it in the air too. That anticipation. Just like that, she didn't understand anything. She felt a steady gaze on her. Turned around. It wasn't hers that was watching, staring very intently, and Nancy suddenly got a chill inside. How could it be possible for a girl stranger to look at her the way Benjamin had once looked at her? Nancy started to rise from the chair, but her legs would not hold her. "Sam, tell me, is the girl who was thrown into the river and the one who was adopted the same girl?" Vanessa slammed her palm on the table. "Well, finally. Ethan, get the valerian quickly. I have a feeling I'm going to need it now." Ethan disappeared and then reappeared. Nancy hadn't seen him at all, hadn't noticed when he'd appeared at the table the first time. There was silence in the room, ringing and heavy. Nancy looked at Adriana. Tears were running down the girl's cheeks. "So you didn't leave me," Nancy, who had finally realized everything that had just been said, jumped up and covered Adriana with herself. "I won't give it to my daughter. I won't give it to you." Then burst into tears and sat on Adriana's desk and hugged her mom. "Mommy, come on, you'll never stop being a mom to me." Nancy was crying too. Then Adriana hugged Natasha with one arm, and with the other Nancy smiled through her tears. Why? Is it possible to have two moms in our state? Lucy's trial was loud because Nancy was to be acquitted at the same time. That hearing was public. It was so crowded there was no place to sit. A family that everyone in town knew. A lot of people remembered that first case, the first time a young girl had been locked up, and most of them realized they'd locked her up for nothing. Nancy both drove her eyes around. She felt confidently dressed now. Nancy was fresh-faced. Adriana sat next to her, and Nancy sat next to her. They had been able to agree that day that they would make Angelina's life easier with their love, rather than make it harder with a showdown. Adriana was fine with that in general. First of all, she was madly glad that her mother had not abandoned her, that she had found her mom, that she was near her now. Secondly, she was near the person whom she had thought of as her mother since childhood, and now she couldn't think of her mother any other way. Sam sat at Nancy's right hand. He immediately sat down like that, and Nancy immediately blushed. She didn't realize what was happening to her. Not a young girl to blush, still blushed every time. Vanessa nudged her husband Science, the man who was not wrong. Say your predictions about Nancy and Sam. Ethan shrugged his shoulders indifferently. Sam proposed to her today. Vanessa was taken aback. What makes you think that? And so confidently. Vanessa looked at her husband in surprise. The devil knows. And suddenly he really guesses Xenia, in the form of confusion on the face of his wife, could hardly restrain laughter. Today, they went with Sam to buy a ring for the event. Lucy had been given a full ride. As she was led away, she screamed curses at Nancy, spitting and whispering like a snake. Nancy looked at her in horror. God, what does money do to people? They stepped outside and Nancy breathed in the air. Well, now that I am now full mistress of my home again, I invite everyone to visit. We should celebrate this and the many other things that have happened. They pulled into the store and headed towards the house. The evening was progressing. Beautiful men were grilling meat. The women were chopping salads, delicious wine, a bonfire, wicker chairs. Oh, where's Adriana? Nancy jumped up, searching for the girl with her eyes. Suddenly, a violin melody so beautiful and so sad, taking the soul. Sam stood up. Everyone surrounded Nancy. The woman looked at them. Vanessa, smiling at his wife, smiled at Nancy and smiled. Adriana, who was playing the violin, approached. Nancy saw that she was smiling as well. Nancy even looked around herself. She might get dirty. But then Sam appeared in the clearing like a wizard. He silently placed a bouquet of white roses at Nancy's feet, knelt down and handed her a ring box. If you don't become my wife, I'll die. Nancy looked at him fearfully. Had he forgotten she was a bunny? No, he hadn't. Men like Sam don't forget anything. Agree. Nancy looked at Adriana in surprise. It was the first time the girl had called her. Nancy nodded her head and immediately fell into Sam's arms and cried. Was it really impossible to believe? Had the black streaks ended? She sought out her daughter. Her daughter forgave her and called her mom. She'd been proposed to by the man she loved with all her heart. She didn't have time to speculate because Sam yelled, "No, ladies, that's not gonna work. I'm gonna go get a spring in everyone's step." Nancy took a look at all the women and realized that everyone was crying. The sight was so unusual and comical that she laughed. Vanessa followed her, then Adriana, and then Nancy couldn't take it anymore. When the men returned, wine glasses in hand, they almost fell over. Now those women who had been sobbing 3 minutes ago were laughing. So watch out for a fall. The men looked at each other, and Sam said, "Let's just wait. This madness has to end sometime." Ethan nodded. They settled down on the grass, stories lazily sipping their wine, looking at the women laughing.